This is the Simpit. I'm your host, Sean Cole, and welcome to another episode of What Am I Doing Wrong? Or What Can We Do to Be Faster? And today's show is going to be a little different than the other episodes. Nothing to learn here as far as driving skills or analyzing our driver. But one of the other things that I talk about often in racing is the mental aspects of racing. And one of those can be avoiding frustrations. And I think frustration is something that hits drivers all the time in sim racing and real life racing. And it's something that we have to learn to deal with. Now, one of the frustrations that I find in iRacing is when I have slower than I expect lap times. I do a bunch of practice all week, I get into the race server, and all of a sudden I'm well off my pace. And I have to think, what am I doing wrong? But sometimes it's not you. Sometimes it's the weather. Weather can play a huge role in both real life and sim racing. Hotter the weather, it's going to affect things. Colder the weather, it's going to affect things. It's not always the same, and this can lead to frustration, and it can lead to people not performing at their peak, and they start fighting against these conditions instead of learning to deal with them. Now, in iRacing, weather does play a huge role. It's hotter, it will affect our lap times. It will make our tires slicker. It will make them run higher temps, and it'll wear them out quicker. And on top of that, it will also affect our engine's performance and rob us of some horsepower. Now, with that said, if you are off your pace, running slow due to the weather, then the chances are your competitors are dealing with the same frustrations. Sure, there are things we can do to the car to compensate for the weather. Obviously, we're going to run less tape on the grill, keeping the engine cool, and that's going to make us slower aerodynamically. But what I'm talking about today is dealing with the core essence of the car, the basics, dealing with the boundaries, the limitations of its grip, and recognizing the conditions. What I really want you to be able to do is not get frustrated by these obstacles or hurdles of slower lap times, stay within those limits, and achieve the best that you possibly can. Now, I'd set up a few different scenarios to show you how much the weather will affect your cornering, your braking, your acceleration, and our overall lap times. So let's start things off by going to the centripetal circuit, or the skid pad. I first started by doing straight line acceleration, followed by threshold braking. I would take the car to the back wall and then accelerate the car, which was already in gear. I used the exact shift points and was attempting to hit the brakes at the same spot each time. I then measured my top speed prior to hitting the brakes and then also looked at the braking distance. So then I tried out two different weather combinations to see how it affected the braking and acceleration of the car. On the colder weather setting, which is 65 degrees, I made 4 runs. Each time under acceleration, I was able to hit 74 miles per hour, all 4 times. However, when the weather was changed to 90 degrees, those speeds were slower by 1 mile an hour on 3 of the 4 attempts. And since I wasn't peeling out on the start and using the same shifting points, we could really see how much the engine was being robbed of its power, and it equaled almost a full mile an hour on acceleration to only 74 miles an hour. Now, on the braking end, I was braking from that peak speed moment of the test. So this actually means that on the cold weather braking runs, I was actually going 1 mile an hour faster when hitting the brakes. When I look at the braking distances with cold weather, I was able to bring the car to stop in 45, 46, 46, and 47 meters for an average of 46 meters total. On the hot weather runs, which was 90 degrees, those distances increased with the stopping distances of 46, 48, 48, and 50 for an average of 48 meters stopping distance. So you can see that the weather has changed our braking distances and our acceleration, but all of this testing was done in a straight line. What about cornering? How much does it affect our corner speeds? My next test was also done on the skid pad by going out to the 80-meter ring, and then I started accelerating until the point the car could hold its line. With the weather set to 65 degrees, I was able to hold the car at about 72 miles an hour, and after doing 9 laps, we can see that I was running lap times between 16.192 and 16.371. And when I looked at the tires after that run, I can see that my right front did most of the work, and it was now at an average temp of 153 degrees with 99% tire wear left. I then repeated the same scenario, but the weather was now kicked up to 90. During this run, I was only able to run at about 68.5 miles per hour on the same 80-meter ring. And after only 7 laps, my lap times were much slower, having dropped to a range of 17.020 up to about 17.205, almost 0.8 of a second slower. When I looked at my tires after the hot weather run, we can see a difference there as well. The right front tire was running an average of about 161, or about 8 degrees hotter. The tire wear was the same at this point, but over time, the hotter tire wear will wear out quicker as well. In iRacing, the humidity is also an adjustment of the weather, but honestly it's not changed nearly as much as the temperature itself, and it doesn't play quite as big of a role. But just to give you a quick example, I did run a session with 65-degree weather, but I kicked it up to 100% humidity. I was able to actually run about a half a mile an hour quicker, and this dropped my lap times to 15.953 up to 16.118, just a hair faster than with no humidity. This is a result of the car making more power due to the denser air that goes with humidity, which will also cool the track and actually allowed me to get a little bit more grip. Now for my final test, I want to see how things affected actual lap times. So I went back to a track that I know very well from my other testing, that Summit Point with the Jefferson Loop, and I went ahead and did a series of laps under different weather conditions. I started with 65 degrees and 0 humidity. In each run, I did 5 laps, and then I dropped the slowest and fastest laps for an average lap of the 3 remaining. I would also take a look at the front tires to see if there is much of a difference after 5 laps. With 65-degree weather, my first session got lap times between 53.297 and 53.644, and after throwing out the high and low, the average lap time was 53.402. On session 2, there was a slight improvement to between 53.102 and 53.565, with an average adjusted lap time of 53.382. And then my final test run was again slightly faster, with times between 53.030 and 53.962, with an average of 53.153. My tire wear was also very similar between each run. You can see I was wearing my right front more than the left, with my left front tire being about 138 degrees with very little wear. My right front tire was averaging about 148 degrees and almost 1% of wear. I then switched over to 90-degree weather. There was an immediate difference in the car's handling. I was pushing into the corners, failing to slow the car down as easily, and once in the corner, it just didn't track the same. My confidence in the line was not as strong as it was with cooler weather. I, as a driver, was struggling with the conditions and had to change my braking zones, my turn-in points, and the speed at which I brought back on the throttle. After my first run, my lap times were between 54.614 and 55.314, and after throwing out the high and low and averaging the remaining, it gave me a lap time of 54.885. My second run was again a bit quicker, dropping those times to between a 54.557 and a 54.998, with an adjusted average being 54.814. The final run was about the same, with lap times between 54.776 and 54.965, with the average being 54.878. When I look at the tire wear on those runs, we can see the left front tire running about 10 degrees hotter, with a little more wear to go along with it. The right front was almost 20 degrees hotter and also showed more wear. That means that over time, it's going to get even worse. So in the end, you can see that it was not only slower by over 1.5 seconds a lap, but more importantly, it was really punishing the tires and making the car more difficult to drive. But you can't let those lap times frustrate you, and that is the point of this show. I deal with a lot of younger or newer drivers, and this is the kind of frustrating thing that I'll hear from them. They'll tell me they practiced all week, and then they got to the race, and things were different, and they were off their pace, and they can't explain why. And I'm telling you, chances are, if it was 10, 15, 20 degrees hotter, there's no way you're going to run the same lap times as you were in practice, but you have to recognize those moments. Again, when you recognize those moments, you have to stay within the boundaries of the car. You have to stay within those grip levels. If your braking distances are longer, you're going to have to brake earlier. If your corner speeds are lower, then you're going to have to brake a little bit more. And anything other than that is just going to add to the frustration. It's going to add to the tire wear. It's going to increase those tire temps and make the situation even worse. Again, stay within the limits, avoid frustration, and drive the best to your capabilities. So I hope this has taught you a little bit on how to deal with the weather, how to deal with one of the many frustrations the driver can focus or face out there on the track. And if you have any ideas for an episode on what can we do to be faster or what am I doing wrong, I hope you'll email me directly at sean@thesimpit.com, and I'll add it to the list, because these shows are very beneficial to the newer drivers, even the experienced ones, because we don't all know everything. Sometimes you got to look at it from a different direction. This is the Simpit. I'm Sean Cole, and I'll see you on the track.